I don't know how you feel, but I really dislike not fully knowing what I'm doing, or even maybe why I'm doing certain things. And that really relates to vinyl playback for me because, as many of you are aware, I got into it for the first time in my life about 2 years ago. And it still really frustrates me, and I think that's because I still just don't know enough. And I really don't like the feeling of lack of confidence at times. Am I always doing the right things to get me the best sound experiences from, let's face it, very expensive vinyl purchases? So I decided I want to look at some specific things in real detail to work out unequivocally what is the best way to do certain things. And I've tested loads of things, so I'm really hoping this video will be useful to new to vinyl, maybe beginners, but also to more seasoned vinylista audiophiles as well. One of the things that has really surprised me is that already, even with my limited amount of vinyl playback experience, I can clearly hear when the stylus has a build-up of dust on it. You can just hear the sound change. So that's got me thinking a lot about not only record cleaning, but the problem of static, and thinking about all of the different anti-static products that are available on the market, so that I could test all of this and find a clear path that would give me not only clean records, but a static-free and therefore as dust-free situation or records or playback situation as possible. And that has to start with the decision to clean records in the first place. And I started cleaning records because I thought I had to. I didn't even really question it. But it's also obvious why you need to clean them as soon as you start to buy them. And these are my two most recent purchases. I bought the Audiophile Classic Norah Jones from Amazon. I think that cost £27. And I actually pre-ordered this. This is the Metallica Black album. It's a limited edition. I bought it because it's got a really lovely finish to the vinyl itself. And this was expensive. This cost £57 for 2-record album. So that's £84 for 2 albums. And when we think about that, let's be real about it for a second. £84 is about 8 and something months of unlimited music streaming from a service like Tidal. So spending £84 on 2 albums, to me at least, only makes sense if I'm going to work hard to actually get the best listening experiences I can from this very expensive investment. And when I took the Norah Jones vinyl out of the packaging, it was visibly pretty filthy. So I can only imagine what filth is in the grooves. And there was a lot of very obvious static on it as well. It was hard to actually get the record out of the packaging. It almost felt stuck in there. And that made me wonder if the high amount of static was the reason for there being so much muck on the record itself, or was it just poor quality packaging? Because in stark contrast, looking at the very cool Metallica vinyl, it looked pretty clean straight out of its much better quality packaging, with hardly any visible dust. So I wondered if the Metallica record has less static, or maybe it's just because of the better quality packaging. But I'm not interested in wondering, I want to know. So I bought an electrostatic tester using money from my Patreon. A huge thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon, as it helps me make better videos like this one. And there's a link down below if you'd like to support the channel, or maybe just to buy me a coffee with a single month's support. And testing the static charge of both records, I surprisingly saw very little difference between them, and both had a pretty significant negative static charge of between 4 and 9 kilovolts, which seems like a hell of a lot to me. And that means any dust or debris that's in the air that has a positive charge, of course, it's going to make its way onto that record and get stuck to it. And somewhere along the lines, we are going to hear that, which is obviously the last thing that we want. So our first line of defense against dust and crap on our records and static charge is cleaning the records. And last year, I treated myself to a Degritter Mk2 ultrasonic record cleaner, which is a very cool cleaning machine that definitely gets the aesthetics right. one of the benefits, I think, of being a late adopter to technology is that you can research and see what everybody else is doing and copy them. And it seemed like more experienced vinylistas than me were getting some really great results from using TurgiClean with their Degritter. So I bought some from eBay, and it's expensive at about £50 for a tiny bottle. But from that tiny bottle, you only need about 20 drops of it in 5 litres of distilled water. So it's not expensive really. And without going into the technicals, TurgiClean is supposed to help the bubbles from the ultrasonic cavitation process get more dirt out of the grooves by creating less surface tension on the record. And that is a real cleaning phenomenon that you can Google. It states very clearly in the TurgiClean instructions that it's very important to rinse the record off once you've cleaned it with TurgiClean, and that is using distilled water. So I actually invested in 2 tanks for the Degritter, one that I could separate for washing and one that I could separate for rinsing, so that the rinse tank always only ever had distilled water in it. And initially, taking advice from another YouTube channel actually, I started by applying a mix of distilled water and TurgiClean straight to the record using like a squeegee bottle, and then I used a brush to basically get a coating around the whole record and do both sides. And then I was only using distilled water in the Degritter itself, which seemed to make sense initially, but that whole process is messy, it's time consuming, and it actually doesn't make any sense at all, I think. So now I'm using a TurgiClean distilled water mix in the wash tank, and for the wash process, using the Degritter's pre-wash function, so it just gives the record a coating before it goes through the clean process. And then of course I have the second tank with just distilled water to always rinse that record off after. And this process is definitely less messy and more simple, but you have to pay attention because you have to change the water tank partway through the cleaning process, and you have to do it quickly enough so the record doesn't dry. So you have to be attentive, but it's fairly straightforward. But does this process make any difference? Yes, I very much think so based on what I've been hearing, but I had never tested it. So I decided to do some running groove sound recording. So I recorded the Metallica album because it was the cleanest straight out of the packet. I recorded the running groove. I then washed it in the Degritter on a level 4 wash, which is like the maximum clean cycle. And then I recorded the running groove, of course. Then I did another wash, another level 4 wash to see if more cleaning could reap better results. And here are those recordings. So let me know down below in the comments section if you think you could hear a difference there, especially between 1 wash and 2 washes. That is really interesting to me. And of course, this is not a scientific test. It's just, something to give you an idea of what might be happening here. But what about static? Did cleaning the record reduce the static charge? Yes, it did. Massively, actually. It reduced the static to well under 1 kilovolt. So a huge reduction in static, which is good to know, but it didn't fully eliminate it, which is also, I think, important to know. But what about after we've cleaned our records? Maybe some audiophiles will go straight from the record cleaner straight to their turntable and listen to the record. I think most people will store their records after cleaning them to listen to them later. And that means they'll likely be using some type of anti-static record sleeve. And this is a behavior that I've been doing since the start without really questioning, why or what are the differences between the different brands and products that you can buy, because they all claim to do the same thing. They all claim to be anti-static, so we assume they're all equally effective in that regard. But we're not about assumptions, we're about testing these things to find out. And just by a pure chance, really, I've used 3 different types of anti-static record sleeves. 2 different ones from SpinCare, which is a brand that you can easily buy on Amazon. And just recently, I bought some MoFi ones just to try a different brand. And what I found really fascinating is there seems to be a huge difference in the anti-static or static behavior of the record sleeves. And I have one of each of the 3 different ones I've been using here. I'm going to try and show you almost live on camera to show you some of the differences. So I'm just going to grab the MoFi one. But if you see like a break or like a blend in the video, that's just to kind of condense the video runtime down to make it better for you to watch. But it's all happening live and I haven't practiced any of this beforehand. So here is a MoFi sleeve. And actually the MoFi sleeves are probably my favorite sleeves out of the 3 I've used so far for like their form factor, like how stiff they stay and how easy they are to put in and out of the cardboard record sleeve. But from an anti-static point of view, I'm expecting to see some static still on this record. I'm expecting to see about one for the charge. I'm not looking at that. 1.7, look, 1.5. So hopefully you can see that on the camera. I'll try and move my hand. It's not easy to show you this. So if I just press the hold button here. So that is 1.55. Hopefully you can see that 1.55 static charge. That's actually really not bad, as you'll see shortly. But clearly that's not eliminated the static, is it? There's still some static there. And actually I think I fully anti-static this record, which I'll show you the process shortly before I put it in that sleeve. So it shows that sleeve is not fully functional. But like as I mentioned, I really like these sleeves for their actual like form factor and how they slide in and out of the cardboard record sleeves. Okay, next then is one of the SpinCare sleeves that I started with originally. And I just bought these because they were available on Amazon, reasonably priced. And it's pretty standard, right? Everybody's probably seen this. I think it's £18 for 50 or something. So let's test the anti-static behavior of these. And amazingly, I'm expecting to see no static. When I was doing the original testing for this, preparing the video, I was seeing no static at all with these. None, absolutely none. So from a static point of view, none. Amazing that this is going exactly as I planned it. The SpinCare, that style of SpinCare sleeve seems to be phenomenal for its anti-static behavior. But I really don't like the form factor of these because like they crumple and they're a bit small and they crumple when you're trying to put them in. So sometimes you're trying to get the record out and it crumples and you end up touching the record with your hands. I cleaned that, now my fingerprints all over it. So from a form factor point of view, I really don't like these. But they, from an anti-static point of view, they work phenomenally well. They actually work. They kill static completely. But the functionality of those is why I started looking at an alternative originally. So an alternative was this style of anti-static sleeve. I think they call it a dynamic sleeve. Again from SpinCare, around the same kind of price. And as you can see, like the form factor of this, I found it makes it much easier to put in and out of the cardboard sleeves. And sometimes I've tried to keep as much of the original packaging as possible. Like it's quite a nice sleeve that a record comes with. So I've been putting this inside that one to try and keep, as much of the packaging as possible. But as you'll see, right, I'm expecting to see an insane amount of static here. So let's test it. So that's a hell of a lot less than the other tests I've done. So this is the one that I knew there'd be one that didn't follow suit. Right, so I'm seeing, let's do it again. So for this particular record, I'm actually seeing, again, less static than the MoFi. But some of the other records I did before this that I was testing, the static was really high. Like that particular sleeve was adding a lot of static to the record. As a quick video interlude, well, red in the face, I just ran over there, just went and grabbed, another record with another one of the dynamic sleeves. I just want to test the static on this one again, just for my own, sanity. Did I get the testing right? So let's just check again. Is this going to show a higher static reading like what I was seeing before? No. No. So again, around 1, about the same as the MoFi, actually. Here's another one, different one. Same again. Let's test it again. There we go. That's more like what I was seeing. So not as high there. So that's 2. That was up to 2.5, 3. It's now down again. So static really does change. But like, I was seeing really high results compared to this yesterday when I was doing this. So that's the highest there. Look, 1.9 kilovolts. Let's try again. So 0.7. So I was really expecting this part of the video to be like a great recommendation tool of that, which it kind of still is. The MoFi is not as effective as the spin care. The larger spin care's perfect. That's about the 10th record I've tested. Every single one had 0 static on it, and that happened by pure chance. I'll show some video up now. That happened by pure chance. I was trying to test the different behavior of static records on the turntable itself, and as I was pulling the records out, there was no static on them to start with. I was like, what's causing that? It was the sleeves, the record sleeves. So the spin cares are really effective. Dynamics, they seem better than I thought. I thought they were terrible, but they're not as bad as I thought, but they still wouldn't be my first choice. And the MoFis are not as good as you would expect, actually, but physically, they're still my favourite. But why do we need to worry about any of this, cleaning or anti-static sleeves, when of course we're probably going to be using some kind of anti-static record cleaning brush? And this was another one of those things and behaviors that I've been doing without really looking into it and testing it properly to find out, is there a difference between maybe a cheap brush, an expensive brush? Do we see a difference in static behavior? And this brush in particular, I just put that one down. This brush in particular is like, I've seen loads of versions of this, like a cheap brush with this kind of flippy design, the same kind of color. This one just happens to be from Project. I got this right at my start of my journey. I think it was £10. And it's claimed to be anti-static, and it's softened up a lot now. At first it was like horrible, awful stiff, but I've used it a lot, so it's stiffened up a lot now. But in stark contrast, this is the Furatech ASB1 brush, which is a £185 record brush. So that's really a lot of money for any type of brush, isn't it? It's a hell of a lot of money. But straight away, you can see a difference here. Like you can feel the difference in the bristles. You can see a difference in the bristles. You can kind of see, a difference in the bristles. So like from a usability point of view, straight away, the ASB1's a lovely brush to use. Like you feel like you can, paint your record and you will never ever scratch it. But do they work for their anti-static behavior? Well, for me, the most interesting thing here is that the Furatech brush is supposed to use a mixture of fibers that dissipate static. So I tested both of them holding a record that was completely static free in my hands while I am grounded. And then I brushed the record a few times, as we might do to remove dust, and then I tested for static. And interestingly, both brushes added a lot of static to the record, but the Furatech brush added more compared to the cheaper Project brush. And I was definitely not expecting that result. I was expecting the opposite, actually. But when you look at the brushes side by side, I think you can see that there is a hell of a lot more bristles here. So I think when you're brushing the record with this brush, there's a hell of a lot more of these bristles in contact with the record. And if there's more contact there, there's likely more friction there. If there's likely more friction there, there's more static there. So I don't think this brush is worse than this brush. I actually think there's just more contact happening with the record here than here. So I actually think that's better, because if we're hoping that this brush is getting down into our tiny little grooves to remove, any dust and debris, surely more contact is better than less contact. That's the way I'm looking at it now. And the other reason why I think this brush is significantly better is the length of the bristles. So these are so short, And you've got to be so delicate with this one, whereas this you can be a bit more heavy-handed. Like sometimes there's stubborn bits of dust, right? And you can be a bit more heavy-handed with this to really feel like you're cleaning that record. But we have to factor in that both of these processes, both of these brushes might be adding static to our records. And that makes me think about the whole, behavior of audiophiles and vinyl Easters, because we might spend time cleaning our records, we've spent time selecting the best anti-static record sleeve, and then we take that clean static-free record, put it on our turntable, and then we brush it right at the last second. And if we're brushing it and adding static to it right at the last second, that's negated everything we've done up until that point. So that makes no sense to me. And it's the common behavior, right? But it makes no sense to me. There has to be a better way. But I want to clarify straight away that when you test the record for static, when it's on the turntable, it's very different to holding it in your hand. And I think that's because the static gets moved to the turntable, or maybe the two just interact with each other. But I still think there is a better way here. And here is something that I've actually owned for years. I owned it long before I even got into vinyl. And this is the Furatech D-Stat3, which is like a handheld device that runs on 4 AA batteries. And this is claimed to eliminate static, fully eliminate it. So I figured, let's test it. So here I have a balloon. So this is going to be very, very, very high static charge. Let's test it. Not as high as it needs to be. So you can see we've got 3, 2 to 3, 2 to 3. Right, so now let's test. Let's see if we get rid of the static, even in a balloon. This is like the ultimate extreme test, isn't it? Clearly it's not designed for this, but let's test it and see what happens. Right, here we go. Gone. Completely gone. That's killed that static, even in a balloon that I've just been rubbing on my chest. So that is the ultimate test. And that's really fantastic, because this is the first time I've done that test. Obviously I've been doing it on records, and I found this to be about 95% effective at completely eliminating static in records, even with batteries that have been in it for years. So I changed the batteries, and then it was about 98%. And by 98 or 95%, I mean sometimes I would run it around a record, I'll test it for static, and there'd be like a tiny amount of residue or tiny amount of, static still there. A second pass, and that was completely gone. Of course, you're never going to know that in the flesh. But the Furatech D-Stat3 is expensive. It costs about £400, so it's expensive. But I can 100% recommend it because it works. It 100% almost eliminates static charge. And that means that we can have, I think, a different approach to cleaning records, because it means that we can take our record in our hands, I think, use our brush, a really nice Furatech brush, brush off all the dust, sorry, not worry about the fact that there's a static being added to the record, because we can then eliminate it fully, completely with our Furatech D-Stat3. So this is quite an expensive way of doing it, and it's quite time consuming, a bit of a pain in the arse way of doing it, but it seems like the most effective and best way of having the best of everything. A clean record, a dust-free record, and a static-free record. There needs to be a video interlude here, because I realised yesterday, after the whole video was shot, I'd edited the whole thing together, I realised that I was testing the Furatech ASB1 record brush incorrectly, because the metal part here at the front, you're supposed to touch it in order to dissipate any static energy that's in the brushes. And that's how you're supposed to use this. So obviously I've only held it by the handle, as you would expect, but actually you're supposed to touch that part to dissipate any static. So let's do another live test. So here I have a really lovely blue record. Let's test the static on it coming out of its own included sleeve. It's pretty dirty as well. I need to clean this one. Let's see what we're getting here. So we're getting a very high static charge. Look, that's the sign of a bad sleeve. 7.8, really high kilovolts. 5.5, 4.3. Right, so let me just put that there. I'll hit the hold so you can see. Look, 5 kilovolts. Hopefully you can see that okay. So let's test our D-Stat. There we go. Test it again. Absolutely none. So that's proof again that the D-stat works. It's killed the static. Right, so now there's no static in the record. I've touched the metal. I've touched it a lot. Let's brush off the dust. You know, I'm obviously probably going a little bit over the top here, but like, so now let's test again. Is there static on there? Right, so let's do it that way around so you can see. So this is what I was saying before, like if you brush the record, I'm just going to do it so I can see now. So we've got 4.7, 4.8, 5.4, 2, and kind of like 4.3. So let me just put a hold on that for you. So look, 4.5. So again, you know, now I've tested the brush correctly. I've held the end. I've done all that. I had done that wrong before. Let me just quickly do our one more time. So you can see. So obviously I can't see that. I'm trying to show you, but none. Yeah, none. Absolutely none. So look, that's definitely going to still add static if you hold it in your hand. Different if you do it on the turntable, of course. But if you hold it in your hand and brush it off, which I like to do because I can see I've removed, look, if I just show you, there was dust on that, but now it's like spotlessly clean. All you need to do is use your D-stat after and your static's gone. Interlude out. But I know audiophiles have been dusting their records on their turntables since the dawn of turntables. So I tested that as well. And I actually got very mixed results. Sometimes dusting the record on the turntable added some static, other times it didn't. If the record was totally static free, it seemed to not add any or not add much by brushing it. But if there was static already on the record, it did seem to add more, but never as much as when I was holding it in my hands. So that is very interesting. And I also tested the Furatech D-stat while the record was spinning on the turntable. Amazingly, it seemed to be able to reduce the static, but it couldn't seem to completely kill it like it does when you hold the record in your hand. So that is why I said it seems like to me the best approach here will be hold the record, dust it first, anti-static it, then place it on the turntable to listen to it. Not the other way around, because again, we might be adding static right at that last key and critical point. So for me, this has been really fascinating and interesting. So hopefully it's been some interesting things here. I've learned quite a bit from doing it, but this is not exhaustive, scientific, perfect testing. And I've actually tested a whole host of other things too that I'm not including here because the video is already going to be long. So, you know, it'd be over an hour. No one wants to watch a video that long. So I'm going to make a part 2 video where I've been testing different types of isolation for record players because, you know, vibration is just as critical for record sound quality, massively critical. That the effects of different isolation, you know, mats under your records is insane actually. So I've tested loads of that and a whole host of other things as well. So there'll be a part B video for this for sure. Plus, if you're interested in following my vinyl journey, you know, I'm trying to discover things. I'm trying to, you know, help other people that are new to this as well. So if you want to see more of this, hit that subscribe button and hopefully you found some use in this video and you've enjoyed it. In that case, hit the thumbs up.